It's been exactly 3 months since I found that velvet box on my plate at dinner. 3 months since I ruined everything. 3 months since I watched Adrian's hopeful expression collapse into something I'd never seen before. A look that said he was finally seeing me for who I really was. I can still hear the soft scrape of his chair against the hardwood as he stood up from our dining room table. The quiet dignity in his voice when he said, "I think we both know where this is going, Julia." No raised voice, no dramatic exit, just the calm certainty of a man who had finally reached his limit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Julia Kirby. I'm 36, and until recently, I was engaged to a man who loved me more than I deserved, which is probably why I'm sitting alone in my apartment on a Friday night, staring at an empty ring finger and wondering how I managed to sabotage the best thing that ever happened to me. People always ask when things started going wrong. That's a complicated question. On paper, Adrian and I were perfect. College sweethearts who reconnected at our 10-year reunion. Both successful in our careers, me in marketing, him in finance. We had the same taste in music, the same dark sense of humor, the same dreams of traveling the world before settling down in a house with a garden where I could grow heirloom tomatoes, and he could build that ridiculous pizza oven he was always talking about. But perfection on paper doesn't account for the parts of yourself you try to hide. The parts that emerge when you're stressed or tired or feeling insecure. And I was feeling all of those things the night of our 3rd anniversary. The merger my company had been working on for months was imploding. My mother had called that morning to remind me, again, that at my age, she already had a husband and a 5-year-old. And Adrian had been distant lately, coming home late from work, taking phone calls in the other room, changing the subject whenever I brought up wedding venues. So when he placed that small velvet box in front of me during our anniversary dinner, I felt a surge of relief. Finally, I thought. The proposal, the ring, the reassurance that everything was on track, that we were solid, that he wasn't having second thoughts. I remember how my hands trembled as I picked up the box, already imagining the diamond inside, already rehearsing my tearful yes in my head. I opened it slowly, savoring the moment. Inside was a silver pendant necklace, not a ring, just a small, intricately designed pendant with a compass motif, hanging from a delicate chain. "It's a compass," Adrian said, his voice soft with anticipation. "Because you're my true north. No matter where life takes us, you're the direction I want to go." It was beautiful, thoughtful, meaningful, and all I could think was, "Where's the ring?" I didn't say it out loud, but something in my expression must have betrayed me, because Adrian's smile faltered. "You don't like it," he said, not a question, but a statement. "No, it's nice," I said, unable to keep the disappointment from my voice. I picked up the necklace, turning it over in my hands. "It's just, I thought maybe tonight would be, you know?" Adrian's brow furrowed. "Tonight would be what?" I sighed, feeling suddenly foolish but too far gone to back out now. "I don't know, Adrian. Something more significant. We've been together 3 years. I'm not getting any younger." The look that crossed his face then, confusion, hurt, then something harder, should have been my warning to stop talking, but I didn't. "It's just that Melissa got engaged last month, and her boyfriend pulled out all the stops, rented out an entire restaurant, had a photographer hiding to capture the moment. And here we are at home with a necklace." As soon as the words left my mouth, I wanted to take them back. Adrian was never the grand gesture type. It was one of the things I'd always loved about him. His thoughtfulness was quiet, consistent, genuine. He remembered how I took my coffee and brought it to me in bed every Sunday. He kept a list in his phone of books I mentioned wanting to read, and they'd appear on my nightstand months later when I'd forgotten all about them. He knew me, the real me, better than anyone. And I'd just thrown it all back in his face because I was insecure about a timeline no one had imposed on us but me. "Wow," Adrian said quietly. He leaned back in his chair, his dinner forgotten. "So that's where we are." "I didn't mean it like that," I backpedaled, realizing too late how ungrateful I sounded. The necklace is beautiful. I guess I'm just wondering where we're heading. We never talk about the future anymore. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. We talk about the future all the time, Julia. We talk about that trip to Portugal, about whether we should get a dog, about moving to a bigger place next year. But not about getting married, I pressed. Not about kids or buying a house instead of renting, or any of the things we used to talk about when we first got together. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an unreadable expression. Then he stood up, walked to the kitchen, and returned with a manila envelope I hadn't noticed before. He placed it on the table between us. I was going to wait until after dinner to give you this, he said, his voice unnervingly calm. But since you're so concerned about our future, maybe now is the perfect time. My heart raced as I opened the envelope. Inside were brochures for a small coastal town in Spain, Beager, along with printouts of house listings. Charming whitewashed homes with blue shutters and terracotta roofs, views of the Mediterranean, gardens bursting with bougainvillea, and paper clipped to the front. Flight confirmations for next month. 2 weeks in Spain to look at properties. You're always saying how much you love it there, Adrian said, watching my face carefully. How you could see us retiring there someday. I thought maybe we shouldn't wait until we're old. Life's too short, right? I've been working with a realtor there for months. That's why I've been so busy lately. I stared at the papers, my throat tight with shame. All those late nights, those secretive phone calls. He'd been planning this surprise, this future for us. And I'd been keeping score, measuring his love against some arbitrary yardstick of public displays and diamond rings. Adrian, I started, but he cut me off with a raised hand. The necklace was just a symbol, Julia. A reminder that no matter where we go, even if we move across an ocean, we'd always find our way together. His voice was steady, but I could hear the hurt underneath. But now I'm not so sure that's what you want. Of course it's what I want, I insisted, reaching for his hand across the table. I'm sorry, I was being stupid and ungrateful and... No, he interrupted, pulling his hand away. You were being honest, for once. That stung, but I couldn't deny it. I'd been harboring these thoughts for a while, this nagging fear that we were stalling, that he wasn't as committed as I was. But the evidence to the contrary was literally spread out on the table in front of me. What does that mean? I asked, my voice small. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was wrestling with something difficult. It means I think we've been living in 2 different relationships, Julia. I thought we were building something real, something that didn't need constant validation or comparison to other people's milestones. We are, I insisted. He shook his head. We're not. Because if we were, that necklace would have been enough. The fact that I love you and choose you every day would be enough. It is enough, I said. But even I could hear the hollow ring to my words. Adrian looked at me for a long moment, his expression softening from anger to something worse, pity. You know what the ironic thing is? I was going to propose in Spain. I even have the ring. He laughed without humor. I wanted it to be somewhere special, somewhere that could be ours, not just another Instagram moment like all your friends have. I felt like I'd been slapped. Adrian, please, I'm sorry. I don't care about any of that stuff, not really. I was just being insecure and stupid and... Stop, he said gently. Just stop. This isn't about the necklace or the ring or Spain. This is about the fact that after 3 years together, you still don't see me. The real me. You see some idealized version of what a boyfriend should be, what a proposal should look like. And I'm tired of feeling like I'm auditioning for the role of perfect fiancé in the movie of your life. I'd never heard him talk like this before, with such clarity, such conviction. It terrified me. That's not fair, I whispered, tears now flowing freely. I do see you. I love you. Maybe, he said, standing up. But you don't respect me, and without that, love isn't enough. He walked to the door, grabbed his coat. I followed him, panic rising in my chest. Where are you going? I asked, my voice breaking. I need some space to think, he said, not meeting my eyes. I'll stay at Caleb's for a few days. Adrian, please, I begged. Let's talk about this. I made a mistake. I was an idiot. He paused at the door, one hand on the knob. Yeah, he said quietly. You were, but so was I for thinking you were ready for the kind of partnership I want. And then he was gone. The click of the door impossibly final in the sudden silence of our apartment. I'd like to say I handled the next few days with dignity, that I gave him the space he asked for, that I used the time for some serious self-reflection. But the truth is, I spiraled. I called him constantly. I texted paragraphs of apologies. I showed up at his office with lunch, only to be told by his assistant that he was in meetings all day. When he finally answered one of my calls, almost a week later, his voice was tired. Julia, this isn't working, he said without preamble. Please, I said, hating the desperation in my voice, but unable to control it. Just come home so we can talk. I'll do better. I'll be better. He sighed. That's exactly the problem. You shouldn't have to try to be better for me. You should be with someone you don't have to perform for. I'm not performing, I insisted. Aren't you? He asked. Think about it, Julia. When was the last time you were completely honest with me about what you want, about what makes you happy? No calculated responses, no saying what you think I want to hear. I was silent, unable to come up with an answer that wasn't damning. That's what I thought, he said quietly. Look, I'm coming by tomorrow to pick up some more clothes. We can talk then. But when he came by the next day, talking was the last thing on my mind. I'd spent hours getting ready, hair done the way he liked it, wearing the dress I wore on our first date, his favorite meal in the oven. One last-ditch effort to remind him of what we had, of what we could still be. He looked exhausted when I opened the door, like he hadn't been sleeping. The sight of him, slightly rumpled, his eyes shadowed with fatigue, made my heart ache. I wanted to pull him into my arms, to apologize again and again until he believed me. Instead, I stepped aside to let him in, gesturing to the dimly lit table set for two, the candles, the wine already poured. Julia, he sighed, taking it all in. This isn't, please, I interrupted. Just dinner. We don't have to talk about us if you don't want to. I miss you. He hesitated, then nodded once. Fine, dinner. We ate mostly in silence, the air between us thick with all the things we weren't saying. I kept catching him looking at me with a strange expression, not anger or hurt, but something like resignation, like he'd already made up his mind. Finally, as I was clearing the plates, I couldn't stand it anymore. I'm wearing it, I blurted out. The necklace. I've worn it every day since you left. Adrian looked up, his eyes finding the silver compass resting against my collarbone. Something flickered across his face, a softening, a moment of the old warmth. But it was gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. It looks nice on you, he said simply. Adrian, I said, sitting back down across from him. I know I messed up, but everyone makes mistakes. You can't throw away 3 years because of one stupid moment. He shook his head, a small sad smile playing at his lips. It wasn't one moment, Julia. It was a pattern I've been ignoring because I love you. Because I thought you'd eventually see that what we have is real and valuable without needing external validation. I do see that, I insisted. No, he said firmly. You don't. And I can't keep trying to convince you. It's exhausting, and it's turning me into someone I don't want to be. Someone who's always trying to prove themselves worthy. So that's it? I asked, my voice rising. You're just giving up? Adrian looked at me for a long moment, his eyes full of a tenderness that made my chest hurt. I'm not giving up, Julia. I'm accepting reality. We want different things. We value different things. And that's okay. But it means we shouldn't be together. I don't accept that, I said, standing up. I don't accept that one mistake means... It wasn't the mistake, he interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. It was what the mistake revealed. About you, about us. He stood up too, gathering his keys from the counter. I should go. No, I said, moving to block his path to the door. No, you can't just leave like this. We can fix this. People fix things all the time. Adrian's eyes were tired but kind. Some things aren't meant to be fixed, Julia. Some things are meant to be lessons. And in that moment, looking at his face, the face I'd woken up to hundreds of mornings, the face I'd thought I'd wake up to for the rest of my life, I knew he was right. Not because we couldn't work through this specific disagreement, but because the disagreement had revealed a fundamental misalignment in how we saw the world, in what we valued, in what we needed from a partner. I stepped aside, letting him pass. Will you at least think about it? I asked. One last desperate attempt. He paused at the door, turning to look at me. I have thought about it for days, and the truth is, Julia, I deserve someone who sees me clearly and loves what they see, not someone who's constantly measuring me against some ideal that doesn't exist. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, and I was alone. The weeks that followed were a blur of grief and anger, at him for leaving, at myself for driving him away. I threw myself into work, stayed late at the office, avoided my empty apartment as much as possible. I took the compass necklace off and buried it in my jewelry box, unable to bear the reminder of what I'd lost. My friends tried to help in their well-meaning ways. You're better off without him, Vanessa insisted over brunch, 3 mimosas deep. If he can't handle one little fight, he's not worth it. But I knew better. It wasn't about the fight. It was about what the fight had revealed. A fundamental disconnect in our values that I'd been too blind or too stubborn to see. A month after our breakup, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw it. A photo of Adrian at a restaurant with a woman I didn't recognize. They weren't being romantic. It looked like a business dinner, but they were smiling, and the sight of his smile, directed at someone else, sent a wave of nausea through me. I closed the app and threw my phone across the couch, as if I could physically distance myself from the image. But it was burned into my mind. The easy smile I hadn't seen in months, the relaxed set of his shoulders. He looked unburdened. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself pulling out the compass necklace again, running my fingers over its intricate design. True north. The direction he'd wanted to go with me, the future I'd been too scared, too insecure, too caught up in external validation to embrace wholeheartedly. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in the 5 weeks since our breakup. I called my mother, not to complain or to seek validation, but to ask a question that had been nagging at me since that night with the velvet box. Mom, were you happy with Dad? Really happy. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. My parents had divorced when I was 12, after years of fights and tension that they'd unsuccessfully tried to hide from me and my brother. My mother had remarried quickly to a man who, on paper, was everything my father wasn't. Wealthy, polished, socially connected. The kind of man who bought her diamonds for every anniversary. Why are you asking me this now? She finally responded, caution in her voice. I need to know, I said simply. Another silence, longer this time. No, she admitted finally. I wasn't, but I thought I could be. If only he would change, I finished for her. Yes, she sighed. If only he would change. It was like hearing my own thoughts spoken aloud. How many times had I thought that about Adrian? If only he was more ambitious. If only he cared more about impressions. If only he would propose already. If only, if only, if only. Did Dad change? I asked, though I already knew the answer. No, my mother said, and I could hear the rueful smile in her voice. He's still the same Elliot he always was, still living in that little house by the lake, still spending his weekends fishing, still driving that ancient truck. And is he happy? I asked, my throat tight. Another pause. Yes, she said quietly. I think he is. We talked for another hour, really talked, for the first time in years, about her second marriage, which had ended after just 5 years, about my father who had never remarried but had built a life that suited him perfectly, about the patterns we repeat, the mistakes we inherit, the lessons we have to learn the hard way. By the time I hung up, something had shifted inside me, a recognition, painful but necessary, that I'd been chasing the wrong things, that I'd been so focused on checking boxes and meeting milestones that I'd missed the point entirely. 2 more months passed. Spring turned to summer. I started therapy, not to win Adrian back, as I'd initially framed it to myself, but to understand why I had been so afraid of a love that didn't conform to external expectations. I learned things about myself that were hard to face, how I'd internalized my mother's values without questioning them, how I measured my worth by what others thought of my relationship, my career, my appearance, how I'd spent 3 years with a man who loved me deeply, but whom I'd never fully seen because I was too busy trying to mold him into someone else. The breakthrough came during a session when my therapist asked a simple question. What did you love about Adrian? Not what he did for you or how he made you feel. Who was he, and what did you admire about him? I started talking and couldn't stop. His integrity, his quiet confidence, his refusal to play social games or pretend to be someone he wasn't, his patience, his clear sense of self. All the qualities I'd simultaneously admired and tried to change. It sounds like, my therapist said gently when I finally fell silent. You loved who he was, but you wanted him to be something different. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. And how do you think that made him feel? She pressed. Like he wasn't enough, I whispered, the full weight of it hitting me for the first time. Like who he was would never be enough for me. That night, 6 months after our breakup, I took out my phone and before I could talk myself out of it, sent Adrian a text. I'm sorry, not for the necklace, but for not seeing you, for not appreciating who you were because I was too busy wishing you were someone else. You deserved better, and I hope you find it. I didn't expect a response, didn't even know if he still had the same number, but an hour later, my phone pinged. Thank you for saying that. I hope you find what you're looking for too, Julia. Simple, kind, final. A period, not a question mark. An ending, not an opening. I cried that night, not the desperate tears of the newly heartbroken, but the quieter, cleaner tears of acceptance, of letting go, of recognizing that some lessons cost dearly but are worth the price. 2 weeks ago, I was having coffee at that little place near the park, the one Adrian and I used to go to on Sunday mornings. I wasn't there on purpose, it was convenient, and after all this time, I'd stopped avoiding the places that reminded me of him. I was absorbed in my book when someone approached my table. I looked up, and there he was. Adrian looked good, tanned, relaxed, his eyes clear and bright. My heart did that familiar flip, but it was muted now, more nostalgia than acute pain. Julia, he said, a small smile on his lips. Mind if I sit for a minute? I gestured to the empty chair across from me, setting my book aside. Of course not. How are you? Good, he said, and I could tell he meant it. Really good, actually. I just got back from Spain. My breath caught. Spain? Did you? He nodded. Yeah, I bought a place in Begur. Just a small house, nothing fancy. But it has the blue shutters and the garden. That's wonderful, I said, and I meant it, despite the bittersweet pang in my chest. I'm happy for you. He studied me for a moment, his head tilted slightly. You look good, Julia. Different somehow. I smiled. Therapy will do that to you. He laughed, a genuine sound that made something in my chest loosen. Me too, actually. Best decision I ever made. Well, second best. I knew what the first best decision was, leaving me, but it didn't hurt like it would have 6 months ago. Instead, I felt a strange sense of pride, both in him for having the courage to walk away and in myself for finally understanding why he had to. We talked for almost an hour, catching up on each other's lives. He was dating someone new, a kindergarten teacher named Elena, who loved hiking and had never owned an Instagram account. I was focusing on myself, on building a life that felt authentic rather than impressive. As he was getting ready to leave, he hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I found this while I was packing for Spain," he said, sliding something across the table. "I thought you might want it back." It was the compass necklace, the silver still bright despite months of neglect. "Thank you," I said, picking it up carefully. "But I don't think, keep it," he insisted gently, "not as a reminder of us, but as a reminder to follow your own true north, wherever that leads you." I nodded, unable to speak around the sudden tightness in my throat. Adrian stood up, giving my shoulder a brief friendly squeeze. "Take care of yourself, Julia." "You too," I managed. "Enjoy Spain. Enjoy your life." He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that had once been mine, and then he was gone, out the door and back to the life he'd built without me. I sat there for a long time after he left, the compass necklace cool against my palm. 3 years together, and it had taken losing him to finally understand what he'd been trying to give me all along. Not just his love, but the freedom to be myself, to find my own direction, to exist without performing. I put the necklace on, feeling its weight settle against my skin. Not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but as a promise to myself, to be more authentic, to value substance over appearance, to stop measuring my worth by other people's yardsticks. Adrian may be done with me, but I'm just beginning to understand myself. And that, I'm learning, is a gift more precious than any ring could ever be.